In this video, we're going to take what we know about sig figs, and now we're actually going to do some rounding. Rounding is something that we're pretty much familiar with, and when our general rules that we've used for rounding in the past are going to apply to significant figures. We just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, and the big thing is maintaining the value of our numbers. So let's take a look at our examples here, and we're going to be taking a look at this. When would I use this, you might be asking yourself. Well, anytime we do any calculations, we typically round our answers. Sometimes we might be multiplying or adding numbers together, and we're going to be taking a look at how to round this out, and this is the first step that we're going to do. So here's our general rules that we have for rounding. We're more or less familiar with these, like I had said before. If we look at a number, and we look at the number to the right of that number, when we round, and if it's 5 or greater, we round up. If the number to the right is 4 or less, we've seen this before, we typically keep everything the same, or we say we round down. The big thing I want you guys to kind of reference or think about when you're doing any sort of rounding is kind of reference money. So think about this in terms of money. So I got two examples down here. Somebody owes me $495. I'm a pretty nice guy loaning out that amount of money. And I tell them just to round it up to the hundreds when they pay me back. So I'm going to round up to the hundreds place here. So the hundreds place here is with this 4. Now when I'm rounding, I got to look at the number just to the right of that 4. That's the 9 here. Our rule is if it's 5 or greater, we round up. So I'm going to round this number up. Now, pretty simple. You guys got familiar with this. If somebody owed me $495, rounding this would probably equal out to 500. We're pretty familiar with this. I want to take a look at what we're actually doing when we're rounding this. When I say I'm rounding up, I'm actually taking this number to the right and I'm bringing it up to a 10, changing this into a 10. So my 9 is actually going to become a 10. I'm going to carry this 1 over here. Everything after this is going to become a 0. And now I just carry this math or carry this 1 over, and this is how it becomes a 500. Right? So rounding up means you're actually taking that number to the right and you're changing it into a 10 and carrying the 1 over there to add on to the next value. So 495 seems to make sense, is equal to $500 when I round. Let's take a look at this next one. Again, somebody owes me $112, and I tell them just to round to the hundreds. So here, 100 spot. This time I take a look at the number just to the right, and it's a 1. Well, I'm going to round that down. So I'm actually going to round this number down because it's 4 or less. When I round down, what I'm actually doing is dropping this number down to a 0, and every number after that also is going to become a 0. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. So my $112, that's equal to about $100. I lose about $12 on that bet, but that's all right. It's okay because we rounded it out. That's what rounding is. It's a close approximation. The big idea, guys, is that we are maintaining the value of the number. $495 is very, very similar in value to $500. $112 is very similar to $100. We're not dropping any of the numbers off here. We're keeping the value of the numbers. Let's take a look at some examples with significant figures, and we'll have you guys try some practice problems. So, instead of talking about places like the ones, the tens, the hundreds place, we're going to talk about the number of sig figs we want to have in our answer. So for this first one, it says round 582.459 to 4 sig figs. So this is what I'm going to take a look at. This is a big old number here, and when I talk about 4 sig figs, I'm actually going to talk about the first 4 numbers of here from the left side. So these are the 4 numbers I want to take a look at. Now when I round, I got to take a look at the number just to the right of this. The number is a 5 or greater, so again, I'm going to round this up. So I'm going to write this down here. I have 582.459. Here's my first 4. I'm taking a look at this number here. It's a 5 or greater, so I need to round this up. And again, I like to think of this 5, instead of just going and changing this, I like to think of it actually becoming a 10. If I'm rounding this 5 up to a 10, I'm going to carry this 1 over. Everything after that 5 also becomes a 0 there. So now I've got to carry this 1 over here to finish out my answer. Well, now I'm going to have 582.4, and then I carry the 1. It's going to be a 5. And then those two zeros, the 5 and the 9 became zeros after it. So that's what I have right there as my answer rounded. But now hold on. Okay? They told me to have 4 significant figures in my answer. If I were to leave this just the way it is, I have my decimal here coming across from the left side here. This actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 significant figures. So I can't have all these zeros at the end of it. I can only have 4 sig figs. So I take a look at the first 4 numbers that are there. Oops, I actually went one too far. Right there is what I'm looking at. So in this case here, when I rounded these, I'm actually going to end up taking these zeros, and we're going to actually drop those off as well. Now, always, guys, always check your end product. Check your results, your answer. Your answer should be similar to the value that you started with. Again, think about this in terms of money. If I had $582.50, that's very close to or very similar to the $582.459 that I started with, right? So these values are very similar. So they're approximates, they're a rounding. So I had to drop those zeros off. I maintained my answer so that it has 4 significant figures. I had to round up. That's our first example. Kind of confusing. Hopefully not too bad. Let's try another one. Hopefully we'll get the hang of it. Alright, so let's take a look at this one. 98.23, and I want to round this to 3 sig figs. So I'm going to write this down here again. So 98.23. I underline the first 3 significant figures there. Take a look at the one to the right. It's 4 or less, so I'm going to actually take this down. Now when I talk about rounding this down, this is actually going to become a 0. So that's how it happens after I do the rounding. So I have 98.20. But again, they asked me to have 3 significant figures in my answer, so I can only have the 98.2 in my answer. This means that I have to drop that 0 off my answer in order to make sure that my answer has the 3 significant figures that they're looking for. So you drop that 0 off, and then you're all set there. So my rounded answer is 98.2. Always double check your work, and if we remember, in terms of money, this was $98.02. That's pretty similar to $98.23 that we started with before we rounded. Make sure that your numbers before, what you started with here, and what you get for your answer at the end are similar in value, making sure we maintain value of our numbers. Let's take a look at one more example and have you guys try some on your own. So in this example, I have 343,621. And I'm supposed to round this to 5 significant figures. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 numbers there that I'm going to round. I'm going to take a look at that number just to the right of that and determine how I'm going to round this. Okay, it's a 1. Well, it's 4 or less, so again, I like to think of this as being rounded down. So instead of being a 1, I'm going to take this down to a 0. Now let me rewrite this. 3, 4, 3, 6, 2, 0. Again, my answer has to have 5 significant figures in the answer. My final answer, that is. So if I take a look at this, this is what I just rounded to, you got to stop and think, well, how many sig figs do I have? Now, there's not a decimal here. So when I'm coming across this number, I'm actually coming from the right side. And remember, one of our rules is we're going to go past the 0 because the zeros are not considered to be significant. So when I look at this, the 2 is my first number that's significant. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers in here that are significant. In this example, it's different than the other ones. Before we were dropping this 0 off, this time we are maintaining this 0. We keep it in there because it's actually not considered to be significant in the way that it is because it does not have the decimal in their answer there. So we go right past that 0. It's also important to keep that 0 because again, if you thought about this in terms of money, right? I would want to have this 343,620. If I drop that off, I would only have $362. I would lose out on a lot of money if we were to drop that 0 off. You cannot drop the 0 off in this answer here. You've got to keep the 0 on there, and you'll still have the 5 sig figs that you're looking for because it's not included as a significant figure. So that was one of the trickier examples I wanted to show you guys. You have some examples I want you to try in the Moodle as follow-up questions. If you have questions on this, make sure you ask me tomorrow in class. Get help before this test because we're moving forward and I want to make sure that you are good to go.